celebrating 9 years of podcast excellence. The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us.
It's once again that time, and I'm going to go ahead and just say it. It is officially WrestleMania season. Royal Rumble, 2 weeks away, and here it is. Now, what WWE has been doing right now in terms of what their product is looking like and what they're doing with their programming, we're getting the full indication now. And there are still people, after day one and after other things that are going on, that are still really much upset as to what's happening with the product and the stars that have been let go and what's left of the direction of the company. Now, when you look at what they have right now, I did say this after the touring schedule came back up in July. You know, the off-season will offer chances for some stars to get that we're going to give you what you want kind of vibe, which it's not even the stars we necessarily ask, but we don't mind. When you look at Doudrop, when you look at Liv Morgan on the women's side, when you look over at Toni Storm until she left, and you look on the men's side, you got Austin Theory. Now you're seeing Otis and Chad Gable. They're getting the tag titles now. And, you know, they're doing other things with the stars, but not really. You know, like Rich Holland, until, you know, he's been a little bit part of that too. You got Rick Boogs that's attached to Shinsuke Nakamura. You got Matt Riddle attached to Randy Orton. Things like that. And then you're still trying to see Damian Priest make his way through while he's holding the U.S. title. There's other stars in the mix you're trying to go and build up. And then in NXT, and you look at the 2.0 brand, there is something to be said, and this is something I heard on Busted Open today as a recording, when they recapped NXT 2.0, and Bully Ray actually made a great point, because whoever comes up from NXT and gets called up, I'm going to take a little twist of what they said. There will be a seamless transition over, smooth, where the character that you see on NXT 2.0 will be exactly the same character that goes up to the main roster, because they've already built that character up there. The way I'm going to twist it is the fact that they choose at this point now to create the character all the way up to the main roster like this. Now they're creating what the character is going to be. They have put this in the way, now they have it the way they want. And that's where we are right now, is that WrestleMania season is exactly where they want things. And when you look at the product, what really stands out that's really, that really is absolutely to pay attention to, that people are really caring about. Okay. To me, it's going to be your singles title holders. When you look at Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar together in the ring, and then you look at Seth Rollins being added to the mix when it comes to Roman Reigns, and Brock Lesnar handling Roman Reigns. All that with MVP, with Paul Heyman as mouthpieces, all of that is great. And that's because I'm sure Paul Heyman has his signature all over this. So those are two major segments that are being handled very well. It's as good as any wrestling promotion can do right now. On the other hand, we could talk about Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair. With Becky Lynch, she's got a committee of stars right now that are being brought up. We could see Bianca Belair right now, after she lost 3 times to Becky Lynch in pay-per-views and at SummerSlam, and to see the chance that maybe Bianca's going to get built back up, and she is being built back up to chase again said Raw Women's title one more time. And I think the thought process of having her go ahead and build herself back up again to win the second time around will be much more important. And it can very well work. When you look at Big E and where he is in the mix. So everybody's complaining about his run, the disappointment they have with his run. And sure, you can say that. And Busted Open also made the point. Okay, well, this guy was on TV all the time. Nothing special about him being champion on TV. He was just, you know, as a babyface. And this is what I'm going to say as well. The baby faces you see on TV a lot. Do you notice that? For the most part. So a babyface champion in normal WWE lore, the babyface is always the fighting champion, always open to a challenge. That's what John Cena was. You see that right there. And then, of course, when there's not that many faces doing this, you notice the heel champions spend a lot more time with the belt. I mean, Drew McIntyre was a great example as well. Held that belt for a long time and constantly defended the title on television or in pay-per-views or just regularly fought in general. And that's where they are. The difference is that Big E, I don't think, got a response. Sure, could you say it was overkill seeing him out there, and so every time you saw him on TV and every time you saw him out there, there was nothing special about him? Well, there was nothing special about Big E that stood him out outside of the New Day. The audience, the casual fans will just say to themselves, oh, okay, well, he's got this run right now as champion, and, eventually he's going to get back to New Day. Because there's nothing different about Big E as a singles competitor. He's still the third member, an equal partner in the New Day. That's where he is. That's his appeal. There's nothing about Big E standalone that makes him an appeal. And you could have done things where, and the thing is, the company could have done something like that. Let's not forget that initially when he was brought into the NXT developmental system after working SCW, I don't know if he worked SCW. I thought he did for a little while. But as Big E Langston, and then they took the Langston off of him when it was the WWE network of NXT, and you see him out there, and the 5 count. And he definitely stood out, and the crowd was behind him. The crowd was hot for him in that early stage. But this company, there are certain stars they don't really care to push right away or make any big deal about. His direction they brought him in as a heavy for Dolph Ziggler, accompanying AJ Lee, and that whole collective together. Then New Day, and he's been with New Day ever since. The other accolade is he's been multi-time tag team champions over and over. And that's, honestly, let's put it like this. What's the chance? Right now, you're seeing the constant matches with Kofi and Xavier Woods not being able to go ahead and beat the Usos for the SmackDown tag team titles. Once Big E is brought into the mix, I have no doubt that if Big E was brought into the mix and the Freebird rules were back in play, and Big E was taking on the Usos with the New Day would become tag team champions. That's a pretty clear dynamic right there. You can see that. So Big E is the focal point. He is the key that picks the lock. He's the way to getting them championship gold. Because I'm pretty sure for most of the matches that they were champions anyway, Big E and Kofi would normally be the run of the championship matches as a tag team, with Xavier usually outside playing plunder, but then Xavier would also switch off with Kofi. But as far as I remember, I always saw Big E in there in the matches and tag team title matches as New Day, and they always, were winning or retaining the gold. If you ever notice that. I would never take the time to go ahead and look back and see what that was, but Big E, as a singles competitor, for him to get the singles run that he got, I don't think it's any big of a deal to me that he doesn't get the big singles run anyways. Remember, you look at Kofi Kingston, multi-time of the mid-card belts, IC, and I forget if he's done U.S. title, and tag team champions. And then you go and look at his run as champion, which he won at WrestleMania, got his WrestleMania moment. Big E could very well get in the Royal Rumble. They can let him win that. It could be somebody else. We just don't know yet. And really, we don't have much of an idea of who necessarily could win the Royal Rumble this year on both sides. I mean, you could definitely say some names that are easily, the possibilities are endless. Of who, the possibilities, not endless, excuse me, let me rephrase that. We could have endless possibilities. But what we don't know is if we have a couple of predictable winners and who they might be and who might be a standout. At the moment, the men's Royal Rumble, we only know, 3, 6, 10 10 competitors so far. And Big E would be the only person, I think, right now in this list that would be the odds-on favorite. But we know there's going to be 20 more names that get brought in here. We don't know who that's going to be yet. When it comes to the women's Royal Rumble match, you have, like 18 stars already announced, and a number of them were Hall of Famers or, veterans that have come back in. And of the names they have here, Rhea Ripley could be, but I don't really think so. You could say Carmella. And I know everybody else is not even looking at the other stars in that Royal Rumble match because Mickie James has overshadowed everybody because of that whole invisible door. Listen, I'll bring that up for a second. I'm sure I brought this up the other day. And to me, it doesn't make it, I did bring it up when I did the Hard to Kill post show, which if you haven't had a chance to listen to it, go ahead and look for it at WrestlingGoesReal.com. Episode is there. Did a good 50 minutes. Actually, I almost did about an hour talking about Hard to Kill and also talked about AEW's Battle of the Belts. So I have that there for you. Check that out for yourselves if you haven't already done so. But I made mention of Mickie James and they'll talk about the invisible door. And that the men's match could also have an invisible door. Look, if it's going to be an invisible door, a veteran from WWE, nobody outside of that whole spectrum, somebody that has been in a WWE ring on the men's side, could be it. So could it be Matt Cardona? Could it be Kurt Hawkins or Brian Myers? Matt Cardona, we're talking about Zack Ryder. Could it be Rhino? Could it be Heath Slater? One of those names, they could. They already work other shows anyway. They work other independent shows anyway. One of them, if they had a chance to go ahead and do a one-off in the Rumble, yeah, why not? I don't think it would be a big a deal anyway. And everybody would just, for the company, to kind of troll the diehard fans, the internet community, sure, they're doing that. They troll you. They got you. Now you're talking about it again. You're talking about them. And it's these little Easter eggs that WWE likes to do on a regular basis to lure this audience up, which is really sometimes just the fire that all these internet wrestling podcasts out there, my podcast brethren, I always refer to them, they all have to work off of this. So you know what? If you want to do shows based on the fact that certain stars are not getting pushed like you think, or what the NXT's been done with, or what Triple H's, his role has been diminished and he's basically demoted, all of that, and Mickie James, and what other palace intrigue that goes on, you can have all of that. But on this program, I don't worry about that. You know what is nice? This is the Royal Rumble season. So people get really excited at the start of the WrestleMania season, and a lot of hype and buzz and the interest, and it's that time of year that things start kind of picking up. Have the ratings picked up? A little bit. SmackDown's in a pretty decent spot, over 2 million viewers, about 2.2 million viewers on average, first two shows of the year. And then you look at Raw. Well, Monday night, they were going to struggle because you had the National Championship game, which I had on for the most part, and I had WWE on in the back end on my laptop because I wasn't watching it because the National Championship game was good. And the Georgia Bulldogs, congratulations to them. 22 million viewers, the mega cast on ESPN, this spectacle that they make on a regular basis. And then next week, I'll tell you what's going to make it worse is that Raw has to compete against a wild card game of the NFL. It's a Monday Night Football game. That's not good. And there's also Arizona Cardinals, LA Rams. Or it's going to be, Los Angeles Rams. And that's not going to be an easy sell. You think the national championship game got an audience? Playoffs? Let me tell you, I wouldn't be surprised if that particular football game gets over 25 million viewers. Now I already know that the Thursday Night Football, the debut of Thursday Night Football this year, I think got 27 million viewers. I don't see how they can't surpass that, and easily been able to get 25 million viewers or up to 20 million viewers for Sunday Night Football games. So at this point, I wouldn't be surprised. And there's nothing that the WWE can do to counteract. What they did and what they've been doing lately also with Monday Night Football is at least that first 15 minutes are compelling. They gave you 12 minutes of Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar. And they just started the promo war leading up to the match at Royal Rumble. Now, Bobby Lashley just kind of did a little introduction. Brock gets all the artillery started off right there. Just a big old snub. Bobby who? It was really 12 minutes. Excellent. Excellent work. It's a match that I was wanting for a long time. It was the match that we all wanted once Bobby came back. This, if anything, Bobby already won the title. Okay? Which made me very happy for a long time as well. I do want to see him get that belt back. But for me, everything that Lashley wanted to have accomplished coming back to WWE has been done. Okay? He got the title, and he had a great run with it. Faction with Hurt Business. And now he gets to face Brock in a program. Awesome. I hope it's not a one-off. I know they're going to have to go eventually to Brock and Roman, which is another great match in itself, the way they're going to set that up. But I wish that Brock and Bobby had more time. Now, maybe they'll get another match leading up to at Saudi Arabia. Maybe that match will have a rematch. Like, that would be great. I don't know yet. But I hope that Bobby would win. I don't think they're going to do it because Brock is destined to go ahead and probably retain and take on Roman. And maybe they could do champion versus champion. They won't necessarily... They'll just do the match. Here's what I think will happen. Champion versus champion will happen in Saudi Arabia. Whatever they're going to call that show. And that's not Crown Jewel because that's not until October. So it'll be Super Showdown or whatever they're going to call it. So my thing is, I think the February 19th show in Saudi Arabia will be headlined with champion versus champion. They will not have the titles on the line. They will not unify the belts. They're not going to get rid of the brand split. They're just not. It's something so specific to WWE anyway, and it doesn't make a difference to that company anyway once they have one show or the other. Because if you're going to just put 5 hours of programming with the same stars on it, you're just overkilling. I mean, it's already rough enough for AEW to make sure not to do that when it comes to Rampage and Dynamite and getting 3 hours of programming. To do that, and then the weeks you have a pay-per-view, that's going to be tough. It's a lot of programming with the same stars. Like right now, you could take a little bit of overkill of Brock Lesnar on 2 shows or Seth Rollins on 2 shows. That's okay. But there's not much more you want to do with that. That crossover bit, it's not going to work well. Plus, the scheduling, the way it's set up for them does work really well. And for the certain slate of stars they have on a 3-hour show or a 2-hour show, they've already cut the staff down to nothing. I mean, what difference does it make now? The difference is that they still have the same stars working the same matches in the same programs and just different variations, different gimmicks of the same formula. And just doing the same thing over and over on television is just a routine. That's what they do now. Where they do give you something at the beginning and something at the end. Whether it could be good or not. You know, I'm basically tired on SmackDown of watching New Day and Usos, but they don't have much else to work off of. Nothing else to put, and they're not going to put out Roman twice. You know, they're not having him defend the belt. They're just putting certain things together, and that's it. And the Usos are attached to Roman Reigns, thus the idea. And New Day and Usos, you know, you could keep putting them out there. And ultimately, while the internet wrestling community doesn't like the fact of seeing New Day and Usos on a regular basis, doesn't mean that the crowd, that the regular every week audience is not dropping off. Like, that's not happening. They're still getting the ratings they're getting. And there isn't anybody on that roster now that would be able to overtop anything that Roman Reigns does or Brock Lesnar does. There is not a one. There, you know, you talking about needle movers. No. There's placeholders. That's what Brock and Roman are. Because you're going to be able to go and keep the audience, retain the audience they have left. Meanwhile, the NXT 2.0 experiment hopefully will bring in some new stars and some new names that will change things up. Now, they're getting a little bit goofy over there. Wendy Chu playing an Orange Cassidy type character and just sleeping I get the gimmick, but it is basically gimmick infringement of Orange Cassidy to a point with a little bit of a change up. I don't know if that really works for me at all, but it's an old school gimmick in that sense because, we've had like kind of quirky characters like this before. So this is one they think they might actually stand out and they could do some really interesting things with this character. Maybe it happens down the line. I don't know. But obviously 2.0, you already see some stars that are going to be fresh and young. And when brought up to the main roster, will already be ready to go. And might get a little bit of an audience because that NXT audience, as I have said before, they've been able to get that rating back up to something exactly what the Black and Gold was. Thus, the Black and Gold are not touring. If they were touring, another thing brought up by Busted Open, yeah. And this is the part they didn't add. So when they did the takeover shows, they were on the same weekend as shows going on the main roster, attached to Survivor Series, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and Royal Rumble. They did that. So yeah, if you're going to pull those shows, and then if they did a couple of shows that were in bigger arenas, that's when you had the star power for it. But in the current, the last end of the Black and Gold brand, remember the NXT for the most part, they had some of their stars where they would go ahead and run them in a Florida circuit. And I used to go to those shows where they would drop down to West Palm or Miami or Fort Pierce or Jacksonville or Tampa. And they would do those shows here. And, you might get up to 1,000 people at a show. Like, I remember at the West Palm Beach County Convention Center, and we might get about 1,000 people in one of their ballrooms to watch a match or watch a show. And we did. And, they could go to other places and see what they could do with it. But for the most part, it was just kind of there. So for me, I look at what they did all with that. And I'm saying to myself, they're not going to pull any crowds with... Now, they're able to pull crowds as part of the AEW banner. When you're looking at Adam Cole and Red Dragon and Bryan Danielson. Bryan Danielson was the main roster. The thing about NXT stars, they have moved over to the other side. Say if it was Jonah that was still working, it was part of the NXT promotion of Bronson Reed again, right? Or, others. You got to ask yourself, are you going to be able to successfully pull 5,000 to 6,000 people for a show like that? Pick an arena. You just can't go to Miami, or you can't go to Chicago, New York, and Philly on a regular. You can't do that. You got to be able to go other places. You got to ask yourself that question. Now, the one thing that helps out with no NXT show on the big four shows anymore, because if they're doing it in the Performance Center, the one thing that helps out is that the indies now get a boost, because now that, let's say, on WrestleMania weekend, that Friday night is wide open now. And then the Saturdays, and that's the other thing too, is that some of the shows they're holding them on Saturdays would have been the night that NXT would have been. So some people might actually do Sunday shows after the fact with those fans that are going to be around, and then they might be able to go and watch a wrestling show or a couple of wrestling shows the next day after. Like, say, after SummerSlam, they might be in Vegas to go and watch some other shows at Sam's Town or wherever else. The indies get a break as a result of things like that for their bigger shows, for the big four events, or even some of the stadium shows they're doing now. If Money in the Bank comes through, I wouldn't be surprised if some wrestling promotions decide to go ahead and piggyback off of that too. So NXT is the developmental system it's supposed to be, and they are shoring up talent that'll be ready to go. Grayson Waller, yeah, he might be ready to go at some point. I can see what they did with him and AJ Styles to warrant that kind of interest in him. You look at Braun Breaker, obviously, the guy it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time, but he is getting seasoned down there. He will be an instant star on the way up. Like, he will break out quickly once added to the main roster. Toxic Attraction? Absolutely. And that's just a storyline waiting to happen. When Toxic Attraction comes in, imagine the female wrestlers are going to be there, ready to be brought up, and who is going to be able to be feuding with them, whoever it might be. There's a lot there that comes from it. And that's where you also have to feel like, well, some of these younger stars down the line, they're going to be able to go ahead and expose vulnerable veterans that have been around for up to the main roster for a long time and say, okay, time to lose your spot. And then you hear all the things about, oh, okay, kid, things like that. And that could very well happen coming up soon. There's a lot there. So WWE can only do so much with their current roster. They can only do so much with their programming at the moment and where they are with things. So, and they do certain things where they will kind of shake things up a little bit. Titles can change at the start of the year, and that's where the Raw Tag Team titles got changed with Alpha Academy beating RK Bro, because that is to trigger the rift between Randy Orton and Matt Riddle, and maybe that match will become a grudge match at WrestleMania. And that's going to be a hell of a match, and they have time to build that up now if they decide to go that route. And the way they told the story with Matt Riddle, following the orders to tag in hot Randy into the match, and Randy the one taking the pin. And now Matt Riddle could very well turn things around, because I don't see why Matt Riddle couldn't turn heel. And I know some people are saying the otherwise, but Matt Riddle, in this whole time associated with Randy Orton has had heel tendencies anyway. We forget that in the middle of the storyline with them together, he did RKO Matt Riddle. Or did we forget about that? And Randy's been playing heelish and skeptical and not trustworthy with him the entire time, it feels like, with only a few times where you feel like there's some real camaraderie with them. But Matt Riddle could say, okay, enough of the fun, enough of the goofiness, enough of the riding around on the scooters, okay? That could all go away. And I don't think it's going to hurt him at all. Matt Riddle turning more serious and much more, devious and out-healing Randy Orton. Thinking about it like this, do you really believe that Matt Riddle cannot be booed? I think he can. I think people really they like the whole arcade bro gimmick, and some of the things with the flip flops fly and all this, yeah. But he's not like a super kid friendly type of character. They've made him like a big old teenager on TV, but I think they could totally transition him into more of a heel and really stand him out and just be a jerk. I can see that happening. And I think and with Randy being the baby face here in this particular feud would do greatly, because I think they really would want Randy to win. And I think that's where they want to go with it. Like Matt Riddle, they've already done really well. They give him I think he's already had singles gold, right? He's been U.S. title. He's won the U.S. title and the tag team titles. So Matt Riddle has been rewarded. He's done very well on the main roster. He's unsung and how well he's done on that main roster. So the eventual feud with Orton and Riddle is good. So you could do it in the Rumble. You could do it a lot of different places. But yeah, the Rumble would be where you definitely do the split. So that's great. Now, those Raw Tag Team titles, it was just used as a gimmick. But those tag team titles don't matter anymore right now. For anything that's going to happen with Otis or Chad Gable, no, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what they do. They can let Apollo Crews and Commander Aziz go on, Street Profits, Dirty Dogs, whatever they want. They could do whatever they want with those stars to go ahead and go after the Raw Tag Team titles. Nobody's going to care. Now, one of the most cringeworthy things that they do on TV for WWE, and I wish they would really get rid of this. If there's something that they could absolutely change, I am really so fed up, and I have said this before, and it's going to bear repeating again. The Insta-feuds, to just give us a little bit of heat, to just give us an instant match. Well, let's just have the match right now. How about we not have the match right now? Can we stop doing that? I know you're going to have to pay that off sometimes, but you're telling me we could not have held off Seth freaking Rollins and Big E for next week? Why not? Why couldn't we do that? Or why couldn't we wait to see what they do in the Royal Rumble? I don't know, something. I just don't care. And that's the other part where, if Big E as a babyface, that's exactly how he's going to respond. And that's the biggest thing that they have, is that the babyfaces have to go ahead and just be so vulnerable and always take the fight. Take the fight right then, right now. Drew McIntyre, same formula. That is the way that Vince wants babyfaces. The babyfaces, they're not always going to be title holders for a long time because that's not the way he wants it. But they're always going to be fighting. They're going to be scrapping. They're going to keep trying. They're going to chase. That's what he wants. And people just need to realize there's no changing in that. Okay, it's a different story when you look over at AEW and what they're doing, right? Hangman Page, face, champion, and he's going to hold on to her a little bit. After a long run with Kenny Omega holding that belt, after a long run with Chris Jericho holding that belt, and Jon Moxley holding that belt. I mean, you think about it. They have kind of split between Jericho, more or less a heel, Moxley, face, Omega, heel, Page, face. I mean, they leave these titles on for long runs. Same thing with the TNT title, right? It's what they do. I mean, when you look at AEW and other organizations too, Impact the same way. I mean, Impact, I think, does kind of go in that WWE route in a way in certain cases, because they have had. Really, like if I think about the last face champion they really had, that was a long run. That was Tessa Blanchard, and Sami Callihan, I guess you could say, did have that. Or actually, no, Pentagon Jr. did for a while, but Josh Alexander hasn't had that for a long time. Moose has held on to it for a long time. Rich Swann had it for a while, and then Kenny Omega, then Christian Cage as a face. But, I mean, they do have certain faces that do get to hold the belt for a significant amount of time. Not long, because the heels usually held on to it more. I just noticed that also in certain dynamics. Yeah, and same thing kind of goes with MLW kind of does that. NWA also has that too, where they are letting certain stars, when they're the main title holders, the faces will get a chance to hold on to her for a while. Like at the moment, Trevor Murdoch is still champion, and he could go for a while after Nick Aldis held that belt. MLW, Alexander Hammerstone is champion now after Jacob Fatu had it for a long time. As a result, Jacob Fatu losing the belt, he eventually turns face. And it's still funny we haven't seen Contra in it yet. Nevertheless, I just don't want the Insta feuds. Seth Rollins also accepting the match. He should have just stepped back, but I don't know. Just decided to go and do it anyway. They could have held this back, or they could have just announced it. Something. But they didn't have to go ahead and just wait and just go instant match. It used to work in the Attitude Era. They need to stop doing that. It really is just a creature of habit, and that habit needs to be broken. It's like smoking 10 packs a day. It's time to stop. They have to stop doing this. It's not working. You're not going to make it special. But once in a while, you got to just okay, let's just tease it and then hold to next week. Can we at least wait a week? Can we at least wait 7 days? Something? You look at Nikki ASH and Rhea Ripley, and now they've broken off, and Nikki ASH is the one that turns heel. I'm wondering what's going to happen to that superhero character now coming up. And what I don't know is if the supervillain is going to take away from what Alexa Bliss is doing right now, now in therapy. Happy to see Alexa Bliss is back. I still would have liked her to be involved in something when it comes to Becky Lynch, but they still want to work this story out because they built this off of Bray Wyatt, and now they want to stick with it. For whatever reason, they think that the Alexa Bliss character, as a little girl with the dolls, well, no more dolls, it's still something they feel like they have to continue that storyline for whatever reason. I don't care for it. I would like Alexa Bliss back into the normal mix. I would prefer that Alexa Bliss gets back into things and would be challenging Becky Lynch. I would have loved that they would have brought her back this week just to go and challenge Becky Lynch for the Royal Rumble. But no. I mean, do we need to have Doudrop, Bianca Belair, and Liv Morgan, who've all, fallen short as of late to Becky Lynch, and then let's see who can be contender of that? only to realize that if Becky Lynch and Doudrop face each other now at Royal Rumble, we know that Becky Lynch is going to win. It's pretty obvious. It's very predictable. I mean, the unpredictability for them in WWE will be if what they did at SummerSlam, where Becky Lynch all of a sudden defeats Bianca Belair in 27 seconds. That's the kind of predictability they'll do, not the other way around. Not the underdog. They're not going to do that. They're not using, and that's another thing that has to be considered. Underdogs don't matter in WrestleMania season. And that's what everybody is rooting for. When you are watching sports like I do, okay, I have been a long-time fan of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Before Tom Brady, back to 1994, when Sam White was coach, and, you know, it was even before Derek Brooks and Rondé Barber and Warren Sapp were even drafted. I know, football talk, blah, 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 blah. My point is, yeah, I like the underdogs. I was an Atlanta Braves fan for baseball for many years, and those teams sucked for a long time. They lost, and they lost, and they lost. And in sports, we do like our underdogs, which is why I understand where certain wrestling fans out there, they like their underdogs, and that's okay. But WWE does not worry about the underdogs. Very rarely do the underdogs get up to the top. Daniel Bryan's the very rare exception. CM Punk is a rare exception. Otherwise, they're not going to do that. They're not going to worry about this so much. They'd rather do other things, like work with Omos. Now they split him off from AJ Styles, and now Omos is getting the squash treatment. Now dominating all his squash matches. So they're giving him that kind of push, whatever, to stretch out Miz and Edge eventually, either as a intergender match or as a mixed tag. That could be at WrestleMania. They're going to just do Maurice and Beth Phoenix for a Royal Rumble to put that in and just let them go. And that's fine. Which we know that Edge and Miz will be at ringside, and the dynamic will continue there. And then eventually they'll again work their way into, maybe able to do the mixed tag match at Saudi Arabia. And like those kind of matches, they'll have a bit of a hype and buzz, but there will not be any particular storyline changes or any title changes, anything significant that will happen that will ultimately be a major break in a storyline, a cliffhanger, something like that. That will not happen in Saudi Arabia. I don't think so. But they'll get matches with real scale and a pretty big marquee. That's what they'll do. Now, you still have things going with Austin Theory and Grayson Waller, and it's great that AJ Styles is the one being brought in to go ahead and do this right here to work enhancement. I mean, why not? I mean, AJ Styles could always be pushed up to the top again, but I think right now where he's at, being able to go and work with the younger stars is a great thing for him. I mean, he did his job for Omos. Now he's doing the job with Austin Theory in this particular feud for however long this is going to be. So, for what it's worth, that's the direction they want to go with what they're going to do altogether. When I look at the SmackDown side, we know that Reigns and Lesnar. Reigns, I don't even know if there's been no word about him defending the belt at the moment, right? Like, we don't have anything like that set up. Oh, actually, no, Seth Rollins. That's the schedule with him for that match. And you know what? For those that were thinking that Seth freaking Rollins could not beat Roman Reigns, I beg to differ. Seth Rollins has had Roman Reigns' number. And Seth Rollins, I don't think has been really booked so badly into the mid-card that he doesn't feel special. Seth Rollins has a whole lot of collateral. I mean, a whole lot of credit here. His value is still very high amongst Vince McMahon and the rest. I mean, they've done what he's done what they've asked him to do. He's totally a company guy. And you could totally see Seth Rollins take this here. So I wouldn't rule it out. And with Roman Reigns and the long run he's had right now, he does not have Paul Heyman at his side. He's on his own. And he has held the belt 400 plus days. Royal Rumble. I mean, the story could write itself that Seth Rollins could upset and then Roman and Brock would face each other, and Brock would go over to the other side to bring the WWE Championship over to the SmackDown side, and that would be the featured match at WrestleMania. So Roman loses that one belt to Seth, but then still goes after Brock. I mean, they could do something like that. Would it sound great? I mean, Roman Reigns is Teflon right now. He's never going to get brought down any lower than he is. That guy is always going to be main event for life. He's Vince's guy. The number one guy right now he has, and they will always book him strong. Does he need to have the belt all the time? No. But to have some change right now, the tribal chief, and see some evolution of the character going up down the line, maybe he turns face. I don't know if he stays much of a heel the way he is. The acknowledgement, he's getting cheers. So without Paul Heyman, that heat doesn't go as much as it is. Roman Reigns will get more of a pop. And when it comes to Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, I think that the smart crowd is going to cheer Brock Lesnar. Meanwhile, the other rest of the crowd, the casual crowd, will definitely root for Roman Reigns. So Roman Reigns losing the belt now, whether it's here at the Royal Rumble or at WrestleMania, I don't think it's much of a difference to me whatsoever. And I'm going to tell you, we'll see how they, book on the way going forward when it comes to Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. But for me, I could see Seth freaking Rollins win. I could totally see an upset at Royal Rumble. It could happen. Because either Brock or Roman are not going to have a belt. We're not getting champion versus champion. You could just throw that out. I don't believe it's going to happen. And then when I see what's happening here, we're not going to get a unification, no undisputed, anything like that. No. But Seth could very well win that belt. So keep that in mind. Royal Rumble so far, just on paper, is a fantastic pay-per-view. Premium live event, excuse me. It's excellent. We still don't even have the SmackDown Women's title match yet scheduled. Well, no, we're not going to have it because of the fact that Charlotte Flair is competing in the Women's Royal Rumble match. And that if Flair wins the match, she gets to pick her opponent at WrestleMania. Okay? I don't think we're going to get that point. But what I do hope for is that, here's the thing. That's another part I got to spot. The surprise at Royal Rumble. We'll talk about that in a minute. The Royal Rumble pay-per-view or the Premium Live event looks great on paper. And so far, they're doing the right thing with the men's singles matches. And Edge and Miz, it's fine. Like, it really is, it's fine. I'm not worried too much about it. They're doing what they can do with it. There's not much more heat they're going to get around it. Now, especially when they got the women involved, it's just going to be just, kind of just plunder. That's all it's going to be. Johnny Knoxville messing around with Sami Zayn. It's funny where Sami Zayn continues to be the person they like to go ahead and attach along with celebrities. When it comes to Logan Paul, and now here, it's something I like to do. And, Johnny Knoxville coming in here, this little pseudo feud with Sami Zayn, that's kind of fun. Rick Boogs, I don't know. He's obviously been focused. They've given him a lot of in-ring time when he's there with Shinsuke Nakamura and what they've done. The IC title has just not been anything there. It's just basically just a pendant for Shinsuke Nakamura to hold, and look, I'm holding gold, and that's about it. He has been a non-factor, and he will be. And that's where he's going to be for the bulk of his career until they decide to let him off the contract at some point, and then he goes back to Japan. To fanfare, as I believe. So now, we know that Corbin and McIntyre are going to be the scheduled match. And remember this, too. There are a number of stars that Roman could have down the line for matches. Rollins right now is the next opponent after McIntyre. Or McIntyre would have been, but then things change. And McIntyre now can't return. And you got to wait for him to come back. There is a little bit of depth on the singles titles for both men and women. You still got Bayley and Sasha Banks now. Sasha now out for a time being, but could very well come back before WrestleMania time. Bayley is eventually going to be coming back at any moment, and she could very well be an entrant in the Royal Rumble as a surprise, a real surprise to everybody out there. And I think she'll get to a major fanfare when she comes back out again, if that very well happens. So, yeah, I mean, right now, you look at McIntyre, he's going to find his way back in at some point. There is a little bit of depth still, but it's still the fact that these older stars have been around for a long time, up in the main event for a long time, and there's not much change up there. But then again, that's how some soap operas are. The same characters are up there on the main spots, and they just kind of rework new stories around them, and that's how they work. There's just not as many as there were at one point. It's very thin, but there is still a little bit of depth left. A couple of things I want to bring up before we're going to wrap things up here. John Cena actually did quite a bit of interviewing this week, and got to make mention of him right now. He's been doing some TV appearances for HBO Max's Peacemaker, but also TBS's Wipeout. He was on the Rich Eisen show this past Tuesday, and he made some points that I want to go and bring up here that are very interesting. One long quote here is about the approach to roster construction and talent development, and from the perspective of someone who was already nearly cut early in his career before going on to being the face of an era. And John Cena said this. It's interesting where he comes off with this point based on on his status, right? Also been pointed as well that he's not done wrestling yet, which is really good to know. Quote, when I started in the WWE had just absorbed WCW and ECW, and also had two developmental territories, and the rosters were abundant. Is probably a good word. So when I started, there were releases twice a year. It created stakes for developmental talent, and it created stakes for talent to try to make a name for themselves, because we just knew. We knew on that calendar year, shortly after WrestleMania or after the holidays, there would be cuts. There always were. And they're always seemed to stop right around when we were actually beginning to redefine ourselves with a new school. The ruthless aggression era style characters, you got Lesnar, Orton, Batista, when those guys begin to anchor in and develop the program going forward in the next decade or more. As we started to expand our reach, we started to have more programming, the talent roster started to get big, and then it became, I think a lot of it might have been their hiring strategy, and this is once again, I'm not thinking for WWE, just me posing a different perspective. I think a lot of it might have been a slightly defensive hiring because there was still a giant boom right now in sports entertainment. People are absorbing the content, they're engaging, making a name for themselves outside of the company. It's no longer a one-stop shop. So I think with this influx of passionate people who love sports entertainment, people do get a name for themselves outside the company. And if the company feels maybe they can be a fit in that world, they're going to try to give that person a shot. They're also really, really bullish on hiring new talent. So that the NXT Performance Center is, I don't want to say overwhelmed, but they're at max capacity. You have all these performers, and a lot of them aren't getting a chance to perform. Now, let's move along here. He says there's a lot of frustration in the audience, he thinks, because they view sports entertainment like I do. I love watching matches. I love seeing potential in human beings. I love seeing potential performers. And I see potential in everybody, especially when people begin to define what they would call a gimmick or a personality. I love to be able to try to run in with it on conversations and see how far we can take it. But there are so many spots. There's only so many spots, he says. From a business standpoint, there's some amount of releases that have had to happen. He understands it. The company justifies that. Hey, this is a move we're making. We want to carry less talent. It has very little to do with profit and loss margin. If the company's strategy is to run on lean roster, it doesn't matter. You run on a lean roster. If the company's strategy is to run a fat roster, I remember we had stacks of performers, he says, and the stock price was $7. It's just a directive the company was given to run on a talent-heavy roster or a talent-lean roster. Well, it's going to be lean now that Nick Khan's in. And, I haven't taken time to talk about how much difference you see in certain things when it comes to what they do. Remember when they used to run Rocket League and they had Cricket Wireless now, who's been a long-time sponsor? And some of the things they were able to do with NBC Universal to kind of, bolster up the advertising, bolster up their image, and get some more marketing out there for themselves. And then what has been done now ever since the relationships with Fox and NBC Universal, and what has been done. It's really a big super change. And I don't think people talked about that enough. But I would say that's something that's got to be considered, and nobody really pays attention to too much. So that's part of what Cena had said there. And then there was another part where he did another interview that also brought up some points, and I want to shout out the Cage Side Seats for putting this out there, talking about the talent releases. He says about the roster cuts, unless your name's Vince McMahon, everyone is replaceable. Now, that's not an exact... Well, no, actually, that's what he did say. He did mention that, you know, he was fortunate enough to be at the show in Atlanta where Stone Cold Steve Austin was fired. At that moment right there, it shot through me like a can because I got the impression that if they could fire Stone Cold Steve Austin, unless your name was Vince McMahon, everyone was replaceable. So, really pretty good insight from John Cena right there. Can appreciate where he came from. A couple of things I want to bring up before we can wrap things up. Ring of Honor, you know, I've been very cynical and pretty dystopian-like when it comes to the return of that brand, but apparently they're going to go ahead with moving forward with their plans to bring the promotion back up. I still want to find out what they're going to do with it, you know, if it's going to be just a glorified indie and really what organizations they're going to work with. Right now, they're already allowing some of the Ring of Honor title holders to defend the Ring of Honor championships and other brands like GCW or Impact and other places, or NWA. Now, here, Ring of Honor is going to focus on 3 belts going forward. Going forward, they're only going to focus on having a world champion, a women's champion, and tag team champions. And that's it. 6-man tag, TV title, pure championships are shelved for the foreseeable future. And right now, the 3 different titles will continue to be defended in the various promotions. And Ring of Honor will have the rights to air those matches on their weekly TV show, which will resume reportedly in mid-March. And Supercard of Honor has been announced. It will be April 1st, Curtis Caldwell Center outside of Dallas, Texas, in Garland, Texas. The 14th event. And nobody has been announced yet as to what's going to be happening with it, so we'll wait on that there. One other story I want to bring up, which was very interesting, that came up this week, and this is a story I think is very interesting. MLW making the news this week because they have filed a lawsuit against WWE alleging that the company nixed their streaming deal. So the whole story was that Court Bauer was working on a deal to get MLW streamed on Tubi, which is a proprietary streaming platform that's owned by Fox, now owned by Disney. The lawsuit is based on WWE's ongoing attempts to undermine competition in and monopolize the professional wrestling market by interfering with MLW's contracts and business prospects. MLW announced a lawsuit, including allegations against the company, noting that they pressured third parties to abandon contracts and prospective relationships with MLW, including a major streaming deal. And then in early 2021, then WWE executive warned Vice TV that Vince McMahon was pissed that Vice was airing MLW programming and Vice should stop working with the promotion. Now, Court Bauer provided a statement on the antitrust lawsuit, says the behavior has to stop. Pretty strong words from Court Bauer, who did work with the company as a story writer for SmackDown for a number of years, that they have been wrongfully depriving its competitors of critical opportunities for many years, but its latest conduct has been even more unconscionable. I think we speak for the rest of the professional wrestling world that we say this anti-competitive behavior has to stop. And the ongoing conduct, the WWE's ongoing misconduct, has hurt fans of professional wrestling and competition in the professional wrestling industry. Through his lawsuit, MLW seeks to recover losses due to the interference and enjoin WWE from future interference. Chuck Carroll, CBS Sports, notes that the lawsuit alleges that Stephanie McMahon managed to end MLW's deal with a Tubi streaming service owned by Fox. McMahon allegedly threatened that Fox could lose the business or preferred content if Tubi did not acquiesce to WWE's demand. MLW received a letter that the deal was terminated the night before they planned to announce it publicly as a result of pressure and interference. Now, I remember hearing all about this. And I must say, MLW might have some footing here. I mean, I forget when it was exactly that Tubi and MLW had made their deal to get put together, but in the story, they're saying it was early 2021 where the deal was being made. And, man, it was huge. The idea was that was the announcement that was going to be made. And Tubi, to put MLW in another place to be noticed, besides YouTube, beIN Sports, and then on Vice, they had to do something. At the moment, MLW is still only on YouTube and Vice, and that's it. They haven't been able to find themselves on a new platform yet. They're still kind of working things out. But nevertheless, it's getting pushed out there a lot, and everybody's talking about it. And it's gotten a lot of headlines. Now, I'm taking from the New York Post in this article, where they also brought up the story that days before MLW content was about to begin airing on Tubi, contract was ended, and MLW said in a complaint that this led to event cancellations and delays, resulting in a 40% drop in ticket sales within weeks. And the result is because of the fact that WWE has right now a 5-year, $1 billion deal with Fox for broadcast rights to Friday Night SmackDown, and also reached a deal with the company to select old pay-per-views during the height of the coronavirus pandemic. Then there's the part about Vice. How about this? That WWE did also interfere in another potential business relationship when Senior Vice President of WWE at the time, Susan Levinson, called the Vice executive to say McMahon was pissed that the network was entering into an agreement in May 2021 to air MLW programming that should end the relationship. The Vice executive then told Levinson they would thought that what she was doing was illegal. It was probably an antitrust violation, according to the suit. And the call resulted in Vice withdrawing from negotiations and only airing one MLW program on October 2nd, MLW Fightland. So another deal for MLW being shot down. Look, if they can prove that Susan Levinson actually did this, they have the calls or the transcripts or something. They have the evidence to provide, to support. Plus, I think what they have right now, listen, it's not just the Tubi deal, it's Vice. Makes sense. And so there's obviously some animosity between WWE and Court Bauer and the fact that he's got his brand up there. The biggest problem is why? What is MLW doing that's so different? I mean, they're just running their own programming. It's not even as big a scale right now. I mean, they can't pull 5,000 seat shows or anything bigger than that at the moment without the help of, the Crash wrestling promotion in Mexico. And when they do 2,300 Arena, I guess they get a couple of thousand. But they're not pulling super shows out here. I mean, they don't even have, right now they just have their YouTube deal, their deal with beIN Sports they've had for a long time, and they've been trying to get themselves on a bigger platform. WGN America is no longer around because they got changed to News Nation. And there's not any other channels right now in the mix that could be picked up, but obviously the market's open for it because of what AEW was able to do. And Impact Wrestling also be on the hold on. But there's just little room right now for MLW to find a place where to go, but Court Bauer obviously has had not a problem with his team to be able to find himself some other places to air their content on a bigger scale. And they've tried. They don't want to just be on Fight TV or beIN Sports or YouTube and that's it. Same thing I would imagine that NWA wants to also find themselves in a bigger platform as well if they can. It makes sense for all of them. For MLW, it's a shame because I like their programming. I like what they do. And it's not going to dent into WWE itself. Now, the other thing that could be said was, what could be said about AEW and what was being done by WWE in terms of antitrust on them? Could they try to use as a evidence, some of the things that were being done with programming to counter program against them? Not the counter programming itself, but things that might have been done behind the scenes. I don't know. There's a lot here because there's a pattern that Court Bauer is trying to say. So I'm just trying to speculate. I'm not sure what he really comes with that, if there's really anything there. We'll find out what happens. We'll keep an eye on the lawsuit and see if there's anything comes from it. I think what actually should happen is, and this is where I think Court Bauer is looking to get in, there could be very well a settlement. Like this is not going to get to court. I think we can get this mediated. This could be settled out of court. And I don't know if Jerry McDevitt, if they're going to have to get the legal team out on this. I think they just, the WWE could just go ahead and, settle out of court, be done with it, under the rug, continue the relationships. This lawsuit, this has to get squashed quick. This doesn't look good for the stock price. Doesn't look good for the broadcast partners and the kind of behavior being done. Like right now, it's an ex-executive, senior vice president that did this, plus Stephanie McMahon being brought into the mix as well. This has to get squashed quickly. Now, MLW probably has some just cause. I think they do. And I wouldn't be surprised if they get a settlement on this. And hey, if they do, MLW benefits from that. They probably add more into the content they're doing right now. And that'll help. Something. But I guess MLW and WWE are not going to be working with each other anytime soon. So, there we go. I'm going to leave it there. So, I like where things are going right now with the Royal Rumble season into WrestleMania season. I'm excited about it. That cautious optimism is very high right now. It's not perfect. And they're very light on storyline, light on depth. But they still have a few things in their pocket that they can pull out when it comes to some surprises, some returns, and maybe they'll do something different in their storylines that'll really grab the interest of people. So come back next week from the Wrestling Control Podcast. We'll keep talking about this because wrestling needs us.
Thank you for listening to the Wrestling is Real podcast. You can find all previous episodes at wrestlingisreal.com or subscribe to the show on all major podcast outlets, including Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Follow the King of Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at King of Podcasts, and search King of Podcasts on YouTube, or type youtube.com/JBRASCO951. This has been a presentation of the King of Podcasts Radio Network.